Oh, Becky needs to.
You got her?
Yeah.
Okay, it looks like we are probably now in there live. Can you see it okay? Oh, she's here. Great, wonderful.
Yep, I see it.
You see it? Excellent. Okay, I'm going to make sure that we are allowing in anybody that wants to come in. Hi, Becky. Thanks for joining. And Elise is coming in. Hi. So we'll just wait another minute or so and then get started. Hey, Elisa.
Oh.
Hi.
Hi, Sarah. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Thank you.
Great.
I'm
Thanks for
doing
joining.
well. Thank you.
Good, good. I look forward to touching base tomorrow and in more detail.
Sure.
Yeah, great. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and get started.
I'm sorry. My phone was not syncing in the calendars.
Oh, about the reschedule? No worries. No worries. I'm
Yeah.
assuming what we have set for tomorrow works.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Beautiful. Beautiful. All right, let's go ahead and get started. Just a couple of housekeeping notes before we launch into today. So one, I want to apologize for the video quality. I've come to the conclusion that it's because I'm working off of my laptop right now. I'm obviously still in the camper, still under construction. It's an adventure, right? And an opportunity to practice negotiation tactics and mindful watching of contractors, while also giving them the opportunity to do what they're hired to do. So it's been a fun adventure, but the video quality is not great. Long story short, I don't have the monitor set up in the camper because there's limited space, but I am going to get a camera so that the video quality is a little bit better. So thank you all for bearing with me during this transitional phase that may last. You know, the project manager in me wants to say it'll last another 4 weeks. The realist in me thinks 6 to 8 if I'm lucky. So we'll work to improve the quality of the video during that time. So today we are doing part 3 in our Power With series, and we're talking about trust. And then next week, we are going to be talking about Power With and connection and executive presence and how that all marries together. The week after that, we're talking about the importance of practice. And in particular, we will be going deep into the data that shows that doing massive and making massive big changes to our lives, yes, change our lives, but what really changes our lives are those small continuous improvements and tweaks, and getting us to understand the data so that we can be thinking about the changes that we want to make now, not waiting until, you know, we have all of the stars aligning and we're doing and pursuing exactly what our dreams are, but rather what can we do now? How can these small tweaks help us to get to the place where we are pursuing our dreams and doing these things? So that's what we'll be doing in 2 weeks' time. So definitely get those on your calendar. If you don't have them on your calendar and you would like the Zoom invite, reach out to me or Janessa and we will get that over to you. If you're watching on Facebook, please go ahead and wave, let us know you're here. If you're watching this later, hit hashtag replays so we can follow up with you and make sure we're answering all questions. So we talked a couple of weeks ago about language and the importance of language in thinking about power and in ultimately shifting the paradigm of power from power over to power with. And then last week, we talked about embodying power with, and this was now, a week and a half ago. It seems like forever since we've been doing these trainings, but last week we further elaborated on that. And then this week we are talking about the importance of trust as it relates to power with. And trust is, and we know, you know, through the data that as a leader, trust is one of the most crucial elements that we can work on because it does a number of things, right? It it to begin with just provides a better environment in which to work, in which we are working, in which the people that we are leading or working alongside with are working. The more trust that is in the environment, the more psychological safety there is, and the more openness that we have with others. This is something that we as women, I think, have an innate advantage on. We are interested in others. We are perhaps genetically programmed to bond based on emotions and experiences more so than our traditional male counterparts. That's not to say that men can't do that, but I think that that is something that some of us, and I can count myself in that camp, some of us at times have suppressed. You know, we have avoided perhaps small talk that might be seen as frivolous, when in reality, some of that small talk, if not a lot of it, is really important towards building a relationship that ultimately in time also leads to enhanced trust. So I wanted to put that out there as sort of the first talking point, and then open up the room and see if there were any questions or thoughts on that, or even observations. I know myself, I have at times thought of people as too chatty and tended towards thinking that that was less professional than I wanted to see in an organization. And now I'm, you know, over the past decade, I've started to reverse that thought. That doesn't mean that there aren't times and places where it's more appropriate versus less appropriate. But I think that, and again, I am putting forward that as women, we have this sort of innate ability and this desire and ability really to connect with others a little faster on a deeper level. And I think that we need to embrace that more. And I'm curious what everybody on the line is thinking about that. So I might actually go ahead and pull on Becky first, if you don't mind, just because you're popping up first.
Lucky me. No, I'm just kidding.
I know, I'm sorry.
I agree with you that I do suppress that. And, you know, now that we've transitioned back to work 2 days a week, I notice people, you know, chatting and reconnecting, I could say. Mm-hmm. And it's really hard to realize, you know, although they're not getting work done, quote unquote, they're building that relationship to make sure that in the future they'll get more work done, or, you know, better work done, because they're able to listen and communicate and, you know, all of those things that you build with having a better relationship.
Yeah, and I think you have a very interesting situation where you are bringing your people back together in an office 2 days a week. And there will be this balance of how in time, right? Because initially those days probably aren't going to be tremendously productive. I believe that you, based on our discussions about calendar blocking and reallocating workload appropriately, are going to make those days in person the more of the meeting days and try and keep the remote days empty. Is that correct?
Yes, that's the goal.
Yeah. So there's already going to be more talking, more chatter, right? And then people are together for the first time in 14, 15 months. So there's the reconnection, as you said. But in time, how do you ensure that what is appropriate the first couple of weeks back in the office where you're really reconnecting sort of tapers a bit? So again, you are connecting and bonding with others, but also still having a productive work environment. So yeah, I think you're going to navigate an interesting time there. And it's great too that you as a leader are seeing that, and maybe even recognizing our own knee-jerk, somewhat programmed response to too much connection and what could possibly be seen as chattiness, etc. Right? Awareness is the first step. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, we get to navigate another interesting thing, because there's one guy who is very conservative and another guy who's very liberal, and they love to chat about politics in the workplace and then start these major 3-hour-long discussions and get other people involved. And so those have restarted now that we've gone back to the office. But again, I think that we're going to need to be doing a little bit of coaching there to try to eliminate that behavior, or at least reduce it to a manageable level.
Right, right. I mean, because no one, even those that believe, strongly that talking and connecting is critical for team forming, unless you're in politics or writing about politics, would think that a 3-hour political debate is appropriate in the office, right? And we could have a whole nother, and maybe we will in time, discussion on whether or not politics should be in the workplace. But if we are talking about inviting people to bring their whole selves, that does involve at times discussions of politics. But how do you navigate that with two individuals that hopefully, and it sounds as though they are at least being respectful of each other's opinions, even if they're not being respectful of each other's times and others in the office time. How do you balance that? So yeah, that's going to be an interesting point. And part of me says it's best for you or for whomever it's a responsibility of, to pull the two of them into the room and say, hey, this can't go on, right? You might get into a discussion about it, which is understandable, and you're going to have to pick it up outside of work hours. But yeah, that's going to be something fun for you to navigate. And I'd love to talk more about that. And talking about trust and thinking about trust, and obviously the political divide is huge. So we can use that as one situation. But when teams are actually able to work through a challenge, and I don't know that this is a challenge that your team can work through, so to speak, but when teams can work through a challenge where there is difference of opinion, difference of thought, difference of planning, and they come out on the other side, if they go through that challenge in a productive fashion and come out with a resolution that is at least acceptable, if not endorsed by all parties, those teams, based on the data that is out there about teams and trust, actually have more trust. The ability to build trust includes bringing teams through tough conversations, through tough decision making, onto the other side. It does not mean that if you push it, if you push the tough decisions and the tough conversations aside, you have better trust. That is not at all the case. So that's something else for us all to think about and keep in our mind. I know the Gainer came on as I was, and I think Melanie came on also while I was introducing this topic. We were talking about the importance of trust in a power with type of leadership and in advancing that. And I was opening the door to the room talking about the fact that women perhaps more innately have this ability to connect with others, which ultimately does lead to building more trust. So Elisa, I'd like to just open the door and see if you have any questions or thoughts on this, and based on your experience in building teams, and in particular building remote teams and labs, what thoughts you might have on that.
Yeah, I mean, in general, I've always had the feeling that maybe women are a little bit easier to connect, and but overall, I think it's just very important to foster communication. And I totally heard what Becky said, but I also, in defense of those people that finally are back together and they can kind of reconnect, it's so important from a social perspective. I think we all feel like we have to redo a little bit and maybe relearn some of those aspects. So as much as it probably impacts productivity a little bit, I think it's going to pay off so much in the long term that, at the moment I'm not back in the office with anybody, but I definitely would support this kind of conversation, not the political ones. I won't get in there, but I'm actually pretty, black and white on that, because I think it just creates a lot of additional problems unless you have a good forum for those kind of discussions. So I tend to be really like, no, let's not go there. But yeah, and I think, communication and open communication is a big foundation that leads to trust, right? When people feel connected to each other, they build those bridges that they know they can rely upon. So to me, it's definitely a very important point that needs a lot of support, not only in the workplace, everywhere.
Yes, very much so. And even thinking about how people are moving back to or towards the new normal, right? Some
Mhm.
organizations are going to do a hybrid approach, like Becky's organization is talking about, where they're in the office 2 days a week and 3 days remote. Some organizations are allowing people to decide whether they go back into the office or don't. And then how do they continue to build a team environment when you perhaps have groups co-located in an office and groups remote, individuals remote, right? For all intents and purposes, what can they be doing, or
Right.
should they be doing to make it as equitable as possible? And then there are organizations that have decided to stay remote. And, you know, there are a lot of things that we've learned that we thought couldn't be done, or thought the hurdle was too high. And,
Mhm.
you know, it does seem as though we will have more opportunity for a remote workforce moving forward. And I think that's terrific, because it expands our ability to really connect with the right talent, regardless of location. I find my own personal journey during this time hilarious, because I started working remotely when, you know, it was over a decade ago, when a lot less people were working remotely. And I'm actually going to, in the coming months, transition to going back into an office. And, you know, it's a fun social experiment, but it is, you know, just interesting, the trajectory. And thinking about, in that situation, I will be in an office with a few select people, but then my team will actually be remotely located. So how do we balance that and bring everybody, you know, together, apart from when we're just bringing people together in physical proximity? So Melanie Gaynor, just any thoughts on that before we move on to continuing to talk about trust and how it's really critical to the power with paradigm?
No, I
well,
go
oh,
ahead.
sorry.
I
Go
opened it
ahead,
up to both of
Melanie.
you. That's my fault.
I was going to just agree with the last speaker, because I automatically, I always want to think of intervention. So as soon as you talked about how important trust is, which I absolutely agree with, I was like, so how can we develop that? And so I loved the ideas about communication, and in education, we talk a lot about transparency, because the people making the decisions are usually not the people implementing the decisions. And
Yep.
so kind of understanding the thought behind those, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, that's huge. That is something that when you read the data on trust in organizations, it talks about the how, and this is of course true for larger organizations, right? The C-suite leaders can build trust by having town hall meetings where they're accessible to be opening and answering questions from a crowd, right? Whereas direct line managers and more of the middle managers, again, in larger organizations, build trust through that relationship building. So what you're saying about academia and education really parallels very well there, where the people making the decisions aren't the ones implementing them. And having that rationale behind it, having that thought process, really helps to either reduce unnecessary questions, perhaps, you know, well, did you think of this? Well, when you lay out, we vetted all of these plans, you know, nobody's saying, did you think of this? But it also just helps to have that transparency. And I love that word transparency in terms of communication, because that is what's fundamental to trust, right? When things remain unsaid for a specific reason, people feel that, like there's an energy associated with it. You call BS on it. You may not know why, but we all have that intuitive sense, and how much we listen to it depends on how in tune we are to it. But yeah, it's so true. And I'm even thinking about it now. I might be drawing too many parallels, so if so, like stop me. But I'm thinking about it in terms of vendors that people work with, or, you know, when you're outsourcing work. I remember being on the CRO side. So in the pharma industry and in drug development, I've been in sponsor side, and then I've been in CRO side. And in CRO side, very often you just get handed a protocol and you're like, execute on this. Well, if you don't know the rationale why decisions were made for said protocol, you're just basically a robotic operations person, right? Whereas if you know what thought process went into selecting certain patients or excluding certain patients, you have a certain passion about that protocol, you have more vested interest, you have more understanding. And those are the relationships, looking back, where I had better relationships with my sponsors. I had more satisfied sponsors. Again, that trust was built through communication and transparency. So I love that addition. Yeah, thanks. Gaynor. All right, your turn.
Hi. So the reason I was late is because I got a call out of the blue from an ex-colleague. Very rare because it's 8 o'clock at night here.
Right.
So this is someone who, when I first worked with her, I was like, oh, this lady's direct, and oh, possibly too direct. But in the year that I got to work with her, we kind of formed this friendship, as in she'll do the data cleaning and I'll do the labs, and we got this good team going together. And we both kind of left 2 months ago, the same company, and just out of the blue, then why I was late is because she was calling. She'd received a call about a new opportunity, and she said, well, I know what we can do to help you. We can split the full-time job between Gaynor and me. So she was calling me with good news saying, oh, well, let's work together again and let's do this. And she was so excited and happy. And yeah, I was just going in with my power with mentality, and she was saying rates. And I went, oh no, we go much higher, you know, because I've been trained by you, Tara. So that was the phone call, that why I was late. Yeah. So it was just nice. Someone out the blue. It's about trust, because at the first I was like, oh, can I work with this lady? But like now, although we don't work together, you've got that relationship still there. How are you? And it's so important, this network of women as well.
Yeah.
What we're in. You know, I'm in the pharmaceutical business as well, like you were, Tara, and the network is very small. So you talk to anyone and they know everyone, you know, so you get to know the good players. And I know I'm one of them, and I know she is. So that was why I was late.
I love that, because it also puts forward that situation where when you first meet someone and you're like, oh, wow, so they operate differently than I do. And wow, maybe they're too blunt, you know, maybe they're too quiet. There are those initial reads that we get on people, but that doesn't preclude us building a trusting relationship with them. Right. There are some people that we don't want to build a trusting relationship with. And that's clear, that happens. However, more often than not, if we can appreciate people for the skill set they're building, for their unique perspective on things, and they are a trustworthy individual, right? And most people are, I do default to that assumption, then we can still build those relationships where, you know, if we weren't as evolved to look past things that initially are different than the way we would work, we may not have the opportunity to build those relationships.
Correct. So yes, that's
exciting.
Yeah, it's very exciting. Yes. And it's just so nice that someone's reached out to you saying, help, can you help me? You know your worth then. Yes.
Right. Very, very much so. And it's great because Gaynor is in this unique situation. And I'll just summarize it quickly, Gaynor, correct me if I'm wrong. But basically, she has a consulting job, but because of UK regulations or new laws that have come out, she has to have more than one consulting job. So it has to be that right fit for that great balance, because she's leading a team. She has this huge role, but now she's going to have a side gig too in order to officially be a consultant and not be penalized, right? Did I summarize that well?
Yeah.
So to split a role with somebody that you trust and be paid at the rate that you know you deserve based on your experience. Those are all great things. Good. Yeah. All right.
Thanks for summarizing that.
I hope I did it justice. All right. So when we're talking about power with, there's this sort of beautiful cycle that can happen when we are working with a team, working to lead a team. Melanie, I'm interested in how this might translate to education. So I want you to think about it, and I'd love for you to pop in and let me know what your thoughts are on this. So when we are initially coming together, you know, many of us have probably seen the team forming sequence of storming, forming, norming, and performing, you know, that sort of set process that teams go through. But when we're initially working on something, coming together for a project, a deliverable, a product development, whatever it may be, we have this opportunity in, again, thinking about it from a power with mentality, to allow the experts, the people that you have brought to the table or that have been brought to your table, finding what they contribute, finding out how best they will perform on a team, and then giving them the opportunity to do so, right? So this involves a certain level of trust from the beginning that you have the right people in the right seats, or that if you don't, you're going to be able to identify that early on and course correct, because there is a role for everyone. It does not necessarily mean that everyone has a role on your team. So you have to have this trust that you are bringing together the right group. You do that through vetting, interviewing, past work experience, understanding, etc. And you then allow them the space to do their work based on the trust that you have in them. So say you've gotten somebody completely junior, straight out of, university, you have a basic understanding of what their educational status is, but you don't know their skill set as an employee, as a person on this team. You may have a smaller area in which you're allowing them to work unsupervised until you've grown that trust and you've understood what their interpersonal skills are, how capable they are in asking questions and keeping abreast. Whereas you have somebody coming to your team who you used to work with 10 years ago, you have no reason to believe that they've done anything but improve. You've had great experience with them throughout. They have a huge lead line, shall we say. Like, they have a huge area in which they may take on a ton of responsibility, and there's very minimal involvement from you as a leader, right? Apart from appropriate check-in points. So the first thing is recognizing as a leader that there's going to be this span, this spectrum of allowance of independent work, right? And just because you're allowing someone a large amount of independent work and autonomy and ability to perhaps even build their own teams that contribute, that doesn't mean that's appropriate for everyone, right? Again, that person just out of university requires much different leadership and even handholding. Even if there are outside mentors helping them, you still will be more involved with that person, even if you're not the direct line manager, because they're brand new to your industry, perhaps. So the first thing is recognizing that's something that we need to really critically think about and analyze and evaluate as we move forward. I gave two very clear-cut examples where you'd know how much room you can give people, but there's many people in the middle there where you're just not sure. And so some of us have a tendency to default towards micromanagement. Some of us have a tendency to default towards laissez-faire management, and neither are right? So we have to figure out what is the right type of management for that person or that group on that team, test it out, and course correct as necessary. And that's instrumental in building trust, because if you have laissez-faire management for a person just out of university and then they keep messing up, they are not going to trust you as a manager, right? If they have you helping them and supporting them, their trust for you and within you grows. So that's the first thing to recognize. And so that is managing your teams. And then when you think about managing up, because for all of us, we are managing up to some extent. Even if we're managing up to a board of directors, potential investors, we are managing up and out in that capacity. There are times where we must take responsibility for what our team delivers, right? So it's important to know what autonomy we've given individuals and groups and teams to come to the table with quality products, projects, etc. And we also have to know that the buck stops with us, unless it has been explicitly delegated to somebody else where the buck stops with them and they are a leader and you're managing that leader. You need to have ownership for that team, for the power with mentality and paradigm to continue to advance. And so that sometimes results in teams failing, right? In groups not achieving what they have set out to achieve. And you have to be prepared as a leader to take on the ownership of that where it's appropriate. And more often than not, if it's your team, if it's your responsibility, it is completely appropriate, and if not necessary, critical, that you hold and be responsible for that. So that sort of cycle, I think about it as like the cycle of trusting your team and delegating and stepping back where appropriate, stepping in where appropriate, listening and observing. And then there's the outward facing, you know, who you're ultimately delivering for, accountability, where you are the one that needs to say, we did not succeed. We did not succeed because of X, Y, and Z. This is what I am doing differently next time. That's where I really comes in, right? Oh, I forgot the quote, but there's something about when a team succeeds, it's we, when a team fails, it's I. And that is not to say that you are a failure or that people are failures. It is to say that that project, that product, whatever, did not succeed, and why. And that doesn't mean you can't salvage it. That doesn't mean you can't move forward from it with a robust book of knowledge. It doesn't even mean that you won't create a better product. You know, there are countless stories out there of teams that invented amazing things because they failed doing what they were actually on a mission for. So, you know, we all need to be thinking about those things, but those two elements to me are essential in leading through power with and building teams that are strong and trusting. So once again, I'd like to open it up and just see if there are any questions or thoughts or comments on that.
Is there a diagram for that in a book or something, like a flow chart?
Maybe somewhere, I don't know. This was sort of as I was brainstorming a couple of weeks ago about trust and teams. I can sort of map it out, and I'd love for us even just to build on it, because I'm sure other people have things that they'd like to throw in. So why don't I just take that as an action, Janessa, if you can just jot that down for me, put it in Slack, to think about how to map out what I'm thinking in a flow chart and then send it around, because I bet others would want to jump in.
I like the bit where you said you can fail, but then you kind of redo it, because we've all been in those situations where something's an external factor, it's out of your control, somebody goes off sick, or the people, you know how people are. So I drew my own little diagram then, but all it was a circle with arrows with nothing on it. Yeah. So I need the missing bits.
Let me throw down what's in my brain, and we'll see if it resonates with anyone. Okay. Wonderful. Thank you, Gaynor.
And to build on Gaynor's last point, I really like the kind of the model of, if we fail, or if I fail, that I state, number one, that I fail, which I think is missing in many different venues. And then number two, here's what I want to do differently, which is missing in lots of different venues. Often it's this blame game that I find super frustrating, because usually it's the person who's not in the room who cannot address it. But it doesn't lead towards problem solving, which is everyone's goal.
Right. Yes.
I think otherwise, I think it fits perfectly with academia. And I'm sure that others feel the exact same way, that often leaders in academia will talk about herding cats, because you essentially hire all super intelligent subject experts, and you trust that they are all capable of independent work, and you give them vague outcomes and you tell them to go, and then we evaluate them formally after 6 years and we say yes or no. That's probably not, I think there's probably no other model where the main evaluation is 6 years into your job, yes or no.
Yeah.
Which I think is really a problem, by the way.
Yes.
And then you're never really evaluated again. Like you're like crowned with a scepter, and then you're just done.
You're done.
Keep doing it.
Oh, there's a reason I didn't go into academia, right? No, I think, I mean, you're talking about so many challenges there, right? And then you get through the thumbs up, but you are continuing to work perhaps with, perhaps not with, depending on how collaborative you want to be, how collaborative academia can be, right? And there are definite limitations there. these people that are amazing, perhaps not, because they either got the thumbs up or thumbs down, and then who knows what their trajectory is after that, right? But independent contributors, not collaborative thinkers necessarily, unless that's their field of study or it's of particular interest to them, right?
Absolutely. And it
Oh
really
my
depends
gosh.
on the field. So in
Yeah.
psychology, we're collaborators because that's how you get large studies done.
Yes.
But in history, you work by yourself. So they even have
Mhm.
trouble working with students because they're like, this is my
Right.
project.
Right.
And I'm like, well, can you give them a part of it to research? And they're like, this is my project. Like that's,
Yeah.
put their
Yeah.
blinders back on.
Right. That's so frustrating. And to your statement about at the very beginning about talking about I fail, like fail. Oh my gosh, fail is such a 4-letter word, and it shouldn't be, right? And so that also is sort of this back to last week's discussion about mindset and reality. Like if we think of failing at something as a failure of our worthiness, then no, we don't want to fail, right? Like that removes any sense of psychological safety that we have in the world, right? So separating our outcomes from our work and from our being, that's so important. And if you can't say I failed and still be looking towards the future, you are in a way continuously disempowering yourself, right? So often we have this tendency just as humans to, when things go wrong, think disempowering thoughts like, why did this happen to me? I'm such a moron. Like, how did I miss that? When, if we can be working, and again, this is to what we'll be talking about in a couple of weeks with like the importance of practice. If we can be working towards those small tweaks in reframing our thought process, and just even the acknowledgement that, oh my God, that's a disempowering thought. Like that is shutting me down from moving forward in this, right? It's a critical practice, and it's one that is continuously a practice, right? I feel I've been doing it for 15 years and there are still times where I default to the, oh my gosh, I'm such a moron. How did I miss that? When like, okay, Tara, that's a disempowering thought. Like, what can we do? What can we learn from this? How can we, be the phoenix rising from the ashes? It is a practice to reprogram our thoughts to empowering thoughts. But being a leader that is able to say, I failed, being a leader that is able to say, I led a project that failed.
Mm-hmm.
Whoa, like what kind of a leader can you be if you can own that? If you can own that and turn it so that there can be some success from it, whether it's a robust book of lessons learned, whether it's this new product that you failed in making that, but it turns out everyone actually needs a Vitamix. So, whatever it may be, there is something that you can at least learn from the situation. And so again, moving from disempowering thoughts to empowering thoughts and moving away from the blame game. It is important and critical that you have a bunch of individuals that you're working with that can take accountability. And there is a difference between holding individuals accountable and blaming them. Mm-hmm. And sometimes what we find as leaders is, this person is not performing. They're not performing, and I was not clear on what performing meant. It can be a marriage of both. That person, yes, maybe they're at a stage in their career where they should be asking more questions. They should be getting more clarification on what performing meant. And I failed in giving them the answers, or they weren't asking the questions. So that's where, as a leader, when you're working with individuals and you do need to hold people accountable, you can also be understanding and holding yourself accountable for whatever portion of that responsibility falls within your camp. So all things to think about, because being a leader is in no way simple. Or maybe it's simple, but it's not easy. I don't know. All right. Anything else on trust before I just open the floor and see if there are any other questions or thoughts or discussion points for today? We've got a quiet group, maybe because I called on everybody initially. All right. Well, nothing else maybe on trust. Melanie, did you want to go into any specific coaching outside of what we're talking about today? We don't have to, there's no pressure. I just know you and I had been corresponding separately about that. And again, if you want to, awesome. If today's not the day, that's cool too.
Yeah, I guess before we talk about that, I was also going to I just came from a perfectionism lecture, so
Yeah.
I'm primed there. But I think that stating that something failed and here are the contributing factors, I think is very empowering. But you'd have to have, and it's probably both a result of and a contributor to trust. Because you have to feel like this is going to be acceptable to say.
Yes.
And I think that admitting mistakes makes you be able to learn from them. And as a leader, it sets this standard that I am not perfect. I am not expecting anyone else to be perfect. And the way we fix things is we figure out what's wrong and we fix them without the other ugly parts that go along with that.
Yeah. Right. Oh, and I'm so glad you brought this up, because even what you said, and maybe I wasn't careful enough in my language earlier too. I'm thinking about this in the context of emotions, like I am sad. Well, so I am sad or I feel sad, right? The importance of the appropriate verbiage. Like I worked on a project or I led a team and we failed to deliver in the timelines appropriate. That's different than I failed, right? And so that sort of feeds into that perfection. And I think perfectionists, as a reformed type A attempt at perfection, which of course I never even came close, right? But that didn't stop my mind from wanting to be that way. I would have said I failed. Right? Whereas the appropriate terminology may be I led a team and we failed to deliver in the timelines, or we failed to deliver a product that met the specifications we were working towards, whatever it may be. This discussion and the perfection twist that you've just brought on, Melanie, all brings back these feelings of and the importance of using the appropriate language. And we may not be primed to automatically default to that. And so rewording what we're saying to ourselves, what we are saying to, our communities, our teams, our organizations, these are important ways of continuing to progress our leadership and our thought process and our mindset around that.
Yeah, I'm glad you make that. Sorry.
Go ahead, Elisa, you started first. Yeah.
Sorry, I was just going to say, as you guys were discussing and bringing up those points, I was exactly thinking the same, the way the subject of the conversation or the thought is actually very important, because it shifts completely the mindset, right?
Yes.
To, in a team, there is never, even the leader is never alone if something goes wrong, right? So I think it's dangerous to kind of go with like, I did it or I failed, because overall it's a product of not only the leadership but also of the people that had other contribution or lack of thereof in the project. So I'm glad you actually clarified that, because I was here sitting and thinking, it's like, is that the way it should be referred to, or it should be more outside of a single person?
Yeah, I do still think, from my perspective, I still think that there's power in saying, I led a team that failed. Because I've unfortunately had, and I'm sure many of you have had the experience of working under some leaders who, when things were a success, it was like, I led this team. And when things were not a success, it was, this team just sucks. This team has failed. And there was no ownership. And maybe I'm coming from a place where I'm rebelling too far against that, but that was really what I was thinking about. But again, what you said, Elisa, the subject of that sentence is really important. Yeah.
I mean, like everything, there are a lot of nuances, right? So it really depends how maybe it's it's conveyed, or even how, as a self-reflection, one puts it on themselves, right? As long
And
as
what
it's
your audience is, right? Who you're
right.
talking to. Yeah, even that
Yeah.
matters. Yeah,
Right.
that's great. And thank you. I'm glad the additional comment about, the
Mhm.
perfectionism and the reframing resonated. And I appreciate that you were sitting there thinking, is this really it? Because I agree with you on that too. And it's complicated, right? I mean,
Right.
it's human beings. It's all it's all very situation specific.
Yeah. And I think I cut somebody else off.
And Gaynor, Gaynor, you were going to say something.
Yeah, so in the field I'm in, I don't know whether Melanie, it's the same for teaching, but we've always done, after something went wrong, and it does in the field I'm in, I've always done a team lessons learned. And what I've asked them to do is to contribute and say, from your department, what went well, what didn't go well, what can we do better? Because there's always a new trial after, where you'll need to say using that vendor that failed, or whoever we're going to blame for it. And like you were trying to say, Tara, make everyone accountable, which it's not just I as the boss, the leader that failed. I do think those lessons learned meetings are good to kind of air everything out and make sure the right people are in those. And yeah, I just wanted to mention that method worked for me.
Yeah, that's great, Gaynor. Where I struggle with lessons learned is I feel that teams sometimes do them. It's like a performative deliverable, and then they never look at them again. And so
Right.
that's where I struggle when I'm working with teams, and it's like, oh, look, you wrote this up in a lessons learned 2 years ago, and you just did the same thing. Like, why, right? How do you take that knowledge and continue to integrate it back in a cyclical fashion so that it is actually keeping you from repeating the same mistakes? Or teams produce these lessons learned documents in silos. And yeah, there's a SharePoint where all the spreadsheets are, and you can go there and search through it and hope that you catch them all. But, I think organizations as a whole can do better about making that a true learning experience for the organization and keeping that learned knowledge even as teams turn over and people depart and new people come in.
I think for lesson learned, I do like the concept. I think in my limited experience with things like that, it works only whether it results in a process change. Right, because it's exactly what you're saying, Tara. Everybody comes up and we sit around a room, or we even write up a document, and then just the document sits there. Nobody looks at it. There is nothing that comes from it, and then honestly, it's a little bit of a waste of time, and maybe even worse, an opportunity for people to blame other people. But if the outcome of that discussion is like, okay, what can we put in place? It's a very, QA, QC perspective to it, like a quality perspective to it. But it's like, if that results in like, okay, how do we change what we do?
Yes.
And our next step is like making a change in what we do so that this cannot happen in the future. Mm-hmm. I think that is much longer lasting, effects, because then it becomes part of like, okay, now we are changing our way of working to prevent this one. It doesn't mean something else is going to go wrong, but at least it becomes part of the infrastructure, right? As it becomes part of the infrastructure, it's more long lasting, I think.
Yeah, Elisa, I love that. I feel like I could riff off that for like hours, and I won't, right? but even, because when, for example, when something really goes wrong and you have a CAPA, a corrective and preventive action plan, right? Then you are forced to do something to change your procedures, your processes. You have to reevaluate. But that's so often, I was just thinking about some of these team lessons learned that I've sat through and listened in on, and no one is saying, what do we need to change to make sure this doesn't happen again? And so there's been this missing question always, and it's never sat right with me. And you just bridge what seems to be an obvious gap to me, but I had never fully bridged. So thank you.
No, but that's exactly what I learned from, I'm a scientist, but I worked around QA for pretty much my whole career. And those are the kind of things that I've always felt like QA is so important as a function, because, you know, it's one of the things that it's like, there is a reason why you have to do it a certain way, right? Because somebody already went through that and it doesn't work otherwise. So that's why we write it down. That's why we have logs. That's why we have form and all of that. It seems like a big infrastructure, but that infrastructure is in place to prevent some of those things from happening, right? That's why I'm saying, you know, lesson learned to me work mostly if they are associated with an actual process change. It's like, okay, we all come up with a way to do it differently. Doesn't mean it's perfect. It just means we recognize that this particular way is not working. Let's change it and let's try something different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Love that. Love that. Thank you. Great ad. All right. Melanie, we don't have a ton of time, and I do have a hard stop at the top of the hour. It's up to you if you want to introduce it or if you would like to wait and we regroup.
Let's wait and regroup.
Okay.
I really like what other folks have said about the team lessons learned. And I think it so naturally goes with the scientific process, because it makes me think of my students. Like, the first thing you do is you see what's been done before and you plan your project and you do it, and it doesn't come out the way that you want, because that's how research is. And you try to like problem solve, like, okay, what's the next step? Because you're always trying just to move to the next step. You're not trying to, well, you always want to do much more than that, but you're only ever doing just, you're getting to the next step. And so, yeah, and I don't know how to make it so that people do look at it so that then the next step is there, but.
Right.
I think writing it down in steps, which is kind of the equivalent of a process, right? The academia is a little bit different from, you know, a regulated environment, but I think the principles are the same, right? You know, like laboratory procedures or things like that can still help at a high level direct people towards one, you know, general route, with the additions that every student, every researcher makes to it. But I think there can still be an infrastructure, a basic infrastructure that can be built to promote that kind of thinking.
Love it. Oh, I've so enjoyed our conversation today, everybody.
This is fun.
I've missed you all. Last week, since we moved to Monday, it was quiet. I think it was very, very quiet. But I'm so glad we're back on Wednesdays. So again, next week we're going to be talking about executive presence and the power with mentality, and how we can actually use a more appropriate way of embodying power to bring us to better control and executive presence. And then the week after that, we are talking about the importance of practice. And I alluded a bit to that. So get those on your calendar if you don't already have them. We'll, of course, always have the recording in either our Facebook group or on our YouTube channel. When they come down from the Facebook group, they go over there. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out. Thank you all for your discussion today. I hope you're taking a lot from it. I definitely am. And I have an action to do at least one flow chart. Now I've got like 3 on my mind. So this should be fun.
Awesome.
Wonderful.
Yeah, thanks,
Thank you
everyone.
all. Have a great rest of your day and evening. Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.